Hello. For those of you new to these presentations, my name is Tony Mays, and I am the Commonwealth of Learning's Education Specialist for Open Schooling. This is the 7th of 11 presentations, each of which summarizes the key issues in different chapters of Cole's new publication, addressing the needs of out-of-school children and youths through expansion of open schooling. This 7th presentation reflects on Chapter 7 by Jan Nitschke, Wilhelmina Loh, and Edwig Karibi. In Chapter 7, we explore the modalities of open schooling provision. The discussion in this chapter is organized around 5 key questions. What are open distance e-learning and open educational practices, ODL and OEP? What is the contribution of ODL to open schooling? What is the contribution of OEP to open schooling? What is the status of ODL and OEP in Namibia? And what are the implications for future provision? Let us start with the first question, which explores what we mean by ODL and OEP. We observe 4 key elements in this definition of ODL. It's an education provision. It uses contemporary technologies. It has both synchronous at the same time and asynchronous at different times forms of communication. And most of the time, the learners and the educators are physically separated from one another. We observe also several key elements in the definition of open educational practices. It's a set of activities and support. It involves the creation, use, and repurposing of open educational resources, and it thinks about how we adapt OER to different contextual settings. At the heart of open educational practice is a willingness to share intellectual property with others, which is a move towards collaboration rather than competition in terms of both content and pedagogy. For ODL and OER to function optimally, there must be a supportive environment. As we can see here, 10 dimensions have been identified as key. We need content, good content. We need to rethink our pedagogy. We need to recognize all the stakeholders involved in the development and implementation. We emphasize collaboration both in the development of the programs as well as the ways in which they are implemented and the ways in which they are taught and learned. We research what we are doing so that we can improve it. We are putting a great deal of emphasis on ways in which to facilitate greater access. And those 6 dimensions are supported by 4 cross-cutting dimensions, which look at the leadership of organizations and programs, the strategies that we follow, the technology that we use to apply. And as we noted in Chapter 4, this has to be appropriate for the context and for the learners. And then we have an ongoing consideration for quality and quality improvement. This is a model developed by Dos Santos, Puni, Munoz in 2016 on opening up education, a support framework for higher education institutions policy report, and is freely downloadable and usable as an open educational resource. So, what is the contribution of ODL, open distance e-learning, to open schooling? So, open distance and e-learning has 4 key components. It's informed by an open learning philosophy. It makes use of distance education pedagogy, and it employs e-learning technologies. And we are interested in the ways in which ODEL approaches can be used to serve the needs of different contexts and different constituencies. Traditional schooling provision was premised on a few people having access to knowledge content and passing it on. In a connected world, content is freely available, so we can shift the focus from delivery of content to co-creating new knowledge with anyone, anywhere, at any time. Governments and their civil society partners, however, need to collaborate to make devices and internet affordable for all, and to build and maintain appropriate ICT infrastructure. So let us now turn from ODL to OEP. There are several ways in which open educational practices, OEP, can contribute to strengthening open schooling provision by fostering greater learning engagement, by sharing of teaching practice, by integrating social media, by overcoming geographical limitations, promoting lifelong learning and wider curriculum choices, by being more open and authentic in the way in which we assess, and enabling learning outside of the limitations of the traditional school year. With ODL and OEP, we can move towards a more open pedagogy, which is characterized by participatory technology, an emphasis on people, on openness and trust, an emphasis on innovation and creativity, doing new things in new ways, sharing ideas and resources openly, building connected communities of learning, emphasizing content and knowledge created and generated by learners themselves, supporting reflective practice, and in that process involving peer review, so students reviewing students, students reviewing teachers, teachers reviewing students, and even people outside the organization or outside of the program also being involved in providing feedback. We can then map all of this into an open ecology model. This is something from one of my own earlier publications. We see that we really are looking at how can we use open educational resources in open distance and e-learning method-bound programs, and doing so in a way that where we share and we collaborate through open educational practices. Obviously, these three things have to tie in with the vision and mission of an institution. Does it work in practice? Let us look at the status of ODL and OEP in Namibia. Namibia is a country on the southwest coast of Africa, bordered by Angola, Zambia, Botswana, and South Africa. It has a long history of distance education provision and is increasingly embracing ODL and OEP. So, for example, the Namibian Open Learning Network Trust, NOLNET, which was established to coordinate ODL activities in the country, and where multiple institutions share centers and ICT infrastructure. The Namibian College of Open Learning, whom we have encountered earlier in the course. NAMCOL also work with a private provider called NotesMaster, which is a platform increasingly collating open educational resources at school level across multiple countries. NAMCOL also supports day schools by providing and sharing its open learning resources. When COVID-19 closed school campuses in Namibia, the visits to the website of NAMCOL and the use of its resources increased from an average of 2,000 a month before COVID-19 to around 18,000 a month in recent times. So you can see that if we have open schooling as part of our schooling subsystem, the open school and the traditional schools can support one another. So what are the implications for future provision? When you have read Chapter 7, we think the following questions might be useful to discuss. What role can or could open distance and e-learning play in your own context? What role can or could open educational practices play in your own context? How should open schooling and campus-based schooling relate to each other? What are the implications of ODL and OEP for teacher development? And what are the implications of ODL and OEP for ICT infrastructure? Sharing ideas on these key questions can help us to reflect upon our own practices and possibilities. As with all Commonwealth of Learning resources, this presentation is available under a CC BY SA open license. It can be used and reused. We thank you for your time and we look forward to the discussions that will follow.